Hi, this is Bernadette again with By the Book Accounting, and today's tutorial is about choosing the correct filing status. So when you're filing your taxes, this video will help you figure out if you need to file married, single, head of household, and what's the difference. So keep in mind that when you file your taxes, your tax filing status is determined by your marital status on the last day of the year. So, for instance, if you were single the entire year and you and your significant other got married on New Year's Eve, December 31st, even though you were single for the entire year, your marital status on December 31st is married. So when you file your taxes the following year for that year, you will have to file a tax return as a married taxpayer. If, let's say, the reverse happens, so let's say you were married the entire year and on December 31st your divorce was final, even though you were married for the entire year, if your divorce was final on December the 31st, on December 31st you're single, so when you're determining your filing status, it will be based on the fact that you're single. So let's talk about the different filing statuses. The first filing status is the easiest one of all, and this is single. So it means that you are not married, meaning you've never been married or you're not married at the particular time. Again, if your divorce was final at the end of the on the last day of the year, then you're not married. So if you're divorced and you don't have dependents, you would file single. Also, if you are legally separated under state law, you qualify to file as a single person. Next filing status is married filing jointly. This is a filing status for married taxpayers. So again, based on your marital status on December 31st of the prior year, if you are married on December the 31st, you can file a married filing joint tax return. So married filing joint just means that you and your spouse will file a tax return together. If your spouse died in the current tax year, you can often file a joint return that year. So for instance, if your spouse died, let's say, God forbid, on January the 2nd of that tax year, because you were married for more than one day of that year, and as long as you don't remarry, if you remarry, then it gets a little complicated, but you can file a married tax return for that year. Okay. Married filing separately is, again, for married taxpayers who file two separate tax returns. And this happens sometimes. It's beneficial for taxpayers to file a married separate tax return because they may owe less if they file separately. And I've seen this happen a lot with high income taxpayers and also taxpayers who have lots of itemized deductions. Filing married separately is beneficial. I've also seen it with married people who don't mix their finances for whatever reason, and so if it's if each spouse is they keep their finances separately, then filing married separately typically works for them because of the way that they file their taxes. In my practice, I always recommend that my clients that we do both. So we'll file a joint return and we'll file a return separately just to see which status will give you the lowest tax liability. Again, if getting the lowest tax liability is not the goal, if you're just wanting to keep it separate, then we just do a straight up married filing separate tax return. Qualifying widow or widower is for a person who has a dependent child who's a widow or a widower. So, an example, if your spouse, let's say it is currently 2015. So if your spouse dies in 2015, when you file your 2015 tax return, you will file married filing joint or jointly because your spouse lived some of the year. But if you have a qualifying child for the next 2 years, you can file as a qualifying widow. And what that does, or widower, depending on who, what that does is it basically gives you the same standard deduction that you would get as a married filing joint person. So this is a rare case. Typically, when spouses qualifying widow is, again, it only happens for the next 2 years. So if the spouse died in 2015, in 2016 and 17, you can file as a qualifying widow, contingent upon the fact that you have a dependent child. And then in the next year, you would file either head of household or single, whatever your marital status is. And again, qualifying widow will only apply to those persons who have not remarried. So if you remarried, then this does not apply to you. The last filing status is head of household, and this one is often abused. So I'm going to try to talk about it as much as I can in this short video. But typically, this status is for unmarried tax payers. So if you're not married and you are paying for over half of the cost to keep up a home for yourself and another person. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your child, but they do have to be a qualifying person, and that's another video. But a qualifying person meaning a child, or it could be a sibling or a parent or something like that. Just make sure that you do not select this status by mistake, because this status is actually highly audited. So you want to make sure that you actually qualify to be head of household. I suggest consulting a tax professional just to confirm. So to wrap it up, selecting the correct filing status can make a significant difference in your tax liability. I've seen people file single when they should have filed head of household, and doing so may have caused them to pay less in taxes or get a bigger refund. I've also seen people file married separately without looking at the option of filing jointly, which ends up again costing them more. So all in all, you should always consult a tax professional if you have questions. This video is just to give you an overview of the filing statuses. Thank you again for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment to this, and share this video with your family and friends. Thanks again.